Hey everybody. In today's video, we're going to talk about how to self-love when you feel like self-harming. Self-harming is when we intentionally cause damage to the surface of our bodies, doing things like cutting, burning, hitting ourselves. But most of the time, these behaviors are not done with any intention of wanting to commit suicide. A lot of the motivations people will talk about when it comes to self-harming are things like, I just need relief from this horrible way that I'm feeling. I can't take it. Or the opposite, I feel completely emotionally numb. I want to feel something. Also things like, I really need that rush. I like that rush. It puts me in a positive state when I do something dangerous because I get that high. And then there are other reasons, as simple as I'm bored. But what I encourage you to look at, especially if you're somebody who self-harms, is though on the surface, those motivations may all look very different, when we get right down to it, the kind of core motivation behind self-harming comes back to something that I talk about in a lot of my videos, which is this thing of the control agenda. And the control agenda is a part of the human condition, meaning we all do this to some degree. It's just that some people engage in the control agenda in ways that maybe don't have quite so big of consequences or maybe aren't quite so dangerous. But I highlight that because, especially for people who don't self-harm, there's a lot of like, I don't understand why you could do this. There's a lot of judgment that a person who self-harms feels, and that brings with it a lot of shame, a lot of secrecy around this kind of thing, that when we get right down to it, anytime when we're in a situation that we don't really like, we naturally feel pulled to kind of shift into fix it, change it, get rid of it, control agenda mode. So I want to talk about a little bit about the control agenda, but mostly how we can bring self-love into this to stop ourselves from shifting into this control agenda, especially when the consequences in terms of behaviors are things that are quite dangerous and self-destructive, and we decide that we don't want to do these kind of things anymore. Before we jump in, this is a very new channel, and so welcome if you're new here. My name is Ashley Walkney. I'm a therapist and credentialed life coach. And on this channel, we talk about self-management strategies to better help ourselves in life. There's so much about our daily life that is beyond our full control. We don't control other people. We don't control all of the situations we're in, or the thousands of thoughts and emotions we have moment by moment throughout the day, or the urges that show up and make us want to do things that we don't really want to be doing. All of this discomfort between what's happening right now and what we'd prefer to have happening, it's like an uninvited guest that shows up unannounced. We don't like it, we don't want it, and this is what's happening. And so the next question is always, what do I do? Fix it, change it, get rid of it. We shift into problem-solving mode. We're hardwired to do this kind of control agenda type of thing. And that's really helpful. If you look around your room right now, you see that everything was created to be a solution to a problem. It's the control agenda in action, playing out in a really helpful way. Self-harm is one example of the control agenda no longer providing a good solution to the problem, but actually becoming the problem itself. Self-love is an alternative choice that kind of acknowledges, this moment sucks right now. This is really hard. And I am not going to add another layer of suffering by doing something that over time just perpetuates this emotional storm that I'm currently in. Instead, I'm going to stand with myself, be like an anchor for myself, and allow this kind of emotional storm to blow by. And I like to use that analogy of emotional storms because, first of all, it's just helpful for me personally, but I also find it pretty accurate to life. Because when we're in an emotional storm, it really does feel like it's never going to end. It's hard to see through it, And sometimes we feel like it's always this way. But when we step back, we can really watch how the weather patterns internally are constantly changing throughout the day. Sometimes it's sprinkling, sometimes it's really thunderstorming, sometimes it's bright and sunny out. And depending on our current situation in life, it can feel a lot like, seasons. Right now, for example, in South Florida, it's thunderstorming and lightning and raining every single day. It's hurricane season, right? When we start doing things in service of this control agenda that add to the emotional storms over time, we're actually elongating the season itself. And so self-love says, I am not going to fight with Mother Nature anymore. I am just going to offer the support and the love and the patience and the compassion to ride this thing out. We have to be willing to coexist with this emotional experience as it is. It can be useful to kind of talk to yourself, remind yourself, this is the emotion of labeling the emotion sadness, loneliness, boredom, whatever it is, and just reminding yourself, yes, this is hard. No, I don't want this. And I can make room for this temporary experience. It's also useful to notice that we categorize things as good and bad. And so when an emotion gets categorized as bad, it automatically makes us want to shift into fix it, change it, get rid of it, this control, problem-solving mode. And so taking a non-judgmental approach to all emotions can be really helpful. That's why I like that analogy of the emotional storms, because it really creates that distance. It really allows us to watch the emotion as an event that is quite separate to ourselves and be a little bit more patient and non-judgmental about it. You can also look at your childhood around this particular emotion that you're struggling with and that's triggering you to want to self-harm. For example, what kinds of messages did you receive when you were a kid growing up about this particular emotion? How did your parents or the other adults in your life deal with this emotion when it showed up? Did you get that kind of message of this is bad, this is wrong, or we don't talk about this, or we're not supposed to feel this way and we have to fix this kind of thing? What kind of control agenda type behaviors did the adults around you engage in? We learn from copying the people around us. We learn when they model things for us. And so it's quite likely that you have taken on a similar relationship with this particular emotion because of the messages you received growing up. And so that is a really helpful observation to be able to have, because then you can start to reshape that relationship you have and take a little bit more of a non-judgmental stance to dealing with that emotion. Another question you can ask yourself when you're not feeling triggered is, next time I feel like self-harming, how would I like to be instead? Like, what kind of traits and characteristics, like what kind of person do I want to be in that situation? And write that out for yourself, keep it with yourself so that you can act on it the next time an urge arises. If those questions are hard for you to answer, then it can be helpful to think about somebody that you admire and imagine how they would deal with this situation, because this is you doing things in the face of adversity that move you closer to the person you are at your core, your identity, your chosen identity. These are like really personal staples. I call them staples that define you as a human being and how you want to be in your life. And anytime that we can act on those things, especially in the face of adversity, we move towards a life of fulfillment. We move toward more personal happiness and self-esteem, and that is a path out of that emotional storm over time. The last thing I want to mention is kind of like a little bit of a warning. You really have to look at what's the motivation behind the action I'm taking, because any action can become a part of that control agenda. And the caution here is that the minute that it becomes a part of that control agenda, you're likely to get frustrated, fed up, you're likely to have those thoughts, this didn't work, and to go back to previous patterns, because again, you're really just back and trying to fix it, change it, get rid of it. You really haven't allowed yourself the amount of willingness to coexist with this emotional event while doing things that honor who you want to be in your life. And so we really have to be careful and watch the actions we're taking and the motivation behind those actions. Is this me trying to run away from how I'm feeling and to control the situation, or is this me standing with myself in the face of adversity and saying, I am big enough to handle this. I can make room for this situation until it decides to pass, and in the meantime, I am going to show up in this chosen way. So just be aware of the difference. I hope you found this video useful for how to self-love when you feel like self-harming. If there is one takeaway that you got from this, something you want to remember for yourself, then I encourage you to write that down and stick it in the comments. It's something you can come back to if you do forget. It's also something that other people might resonate with too, and is a good reminder for them, or could maybe even start a conversation. And if you have any questions about anything I talked about, I know some of this can be kind of confusing, and so please leave those questions in the comments. And finally, if there's a follow-up video on this particular subject that you'd like me to create, also leave that as well. As always, if you liked this video, if you got something out of it, please like it, please share it with your friends. You never know who this video needs to reach and who it might reach by doing something like that. And hit that subscribe button. Join the channel if you want to see more videos from me in the future. Hope to see you again. Take care.